With the WINN FM News, I am Kevin Brown. Our top stories: CARICOM Technical Working Group addresses maritime emissions reduction. Royal St. Christopher and Nevis Police Force reports 57% homicide resolution rate for 2024. ECCB issues request for proposal for regional standards setting body legislation. Panel discusses new real estate bill in St. Lucia. Company in Trinidad paying greater attention to staff's mental health, adopting policies to improve staff productivity. Internationally, United Nations condemns Israeli Houthi escalation. Now, the details. On December 18, 2024, a significant CARICOM Technical Working Group meeting on maritime issues occurred. The meeting focused on negotiations for measures to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the shipping industry. The meeting marked the inaugural session of the Maritime Technical Working Group, MTWG, since its establishment, following the 113th special meeting of the Council of Trade and Development on Transportation in June 2024. Richmond Bassant, the Maritime Administrator from Trinidad and Tobago's Ministry of Works and Transport, was one of the chairmen of this crucial assembly. During the meeting, participants engaged in in-depth discussions regarding midterm measures essential for ensuring a just and equitable transition to a cleaner shipping industry. A key feature of the session was a presentation on effective and sustainable ocean management and governance, which is vital for developing the region's blue economy. The emphasis on sustainable practices align with CARICOM's goals of fostering economic resilience and environmental sustainability in its member states. Dr. Wendell Samuel, Acting Assistant Secretary General for Economic Integration, Innovation and Development, underscored the discussion's critical importance to regional efforts to address climate change and reduce emissions. He noted that the CARICOM Secretariat was committed to facilitating these discussions, encouraging member states to provide updates, share insights into the negotiations, and explore future collaborative action pathways. The Maritime Technology Cooperation Center, MTCC, supports this initiative, which provides crucial technical assistance to enhance maritime efficiency and reduce emissions. The MTCC collaborates with regional stakeholders to implement innovative solutions that align with the International Maritime Organization (IMO) standards. Furthermore, other regional initiatives like the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency (CCRE) have been instrumental in promoting green technologies and alternative energy sources within the maritime sector. These organizations are relentlessly working to reduce the Caribbean's carbon footprint through strategic plans that embrace renewable energies and energy efficiency practices. As CARICOM moves forward with its climate agenda, the synergy between various initiatives emphasizes a collective approach to tackling the challenges presented by climate change. The engagement of institutions such as the University of the West Indies (UWI) underscores the importance of academic and research partnerships in informing policy and operational frameworks that support sustainable development. The commitment to reducing emissions within the shipping sector is not just a regulatory obligation, it is pivotal for the long-term sustainability of Caribbean economies that depend heavily on maritime transport for trade and connectivity. As the MTWG initiates its work, it aims to lay a solid foundation for comprehensive strategies that will benefit the maritime industry and the Caribbean's broader environmental and economic landscape. The Royal St. Christopher and Nevis Police Force has issued a report on the homicide resolution rate for 2024, solving 16 out of 28 homicides committed across the Federation, resulting in a resolution rate of 57%. In comparison, 2023 saw the police force reporting 26 cases. However, the resolution rate for that year was markedly lower at 46%, as 12 cases were solved. The increase in homicides from 2023 to 2024, despite the improved resolution rate, signals ongoing challenges in crime prevention and public safety measures in St. Kitts and Nevis. The police force attributes its notable success in 2024 to several strategic advancements. Increased officer training has been a cornerstone in enhancing investigative skills and techniques. The training has included modern methodologies and technology, enabling officers to tackle complex cases more effectively. Moreover, the force has emphasized strong interagency collaboration, pooling resources and intelligence across different law enforcement agencies to combat homicide more effectively. Enhanced engagement with the public has also played a critical role, as community members are essential partners in identifying leads and providing information that can break cases wide open. Examining the broader context, 2022 was marked by an even higher number of homicides at 30, the highest in recent years, with a resolution rate of 40%, solving only 12 cases that year. The troubling trend illustrates the ongoing challenges faced by law enforcement in reducing violent crimes and ensuring unsolved cases do not linger. The increased murder figures, particularly the leap from 2020's figure, continue to prompt discussions on the socioeconomic factors contributing to violent incidents across the Federation. The increase from 2022 to 2023 and then the number of cases solved in 2024 reflects a continuous upward trajectory in violence and resolution. According to the police, strategically addressing the root causes of crime while enhancing investigative practices has been pivotal to these efforts. Looking forward to 2025, the force expressed commitment to further improvements. One key objective is to boost crime resolution rates and use the successes of 2024 to tackle further unsolved cases. The Royal St. Christopher and Nevis Police Force plans to expand community outreach efforts for at-risk youth, bolstering preventative measures by engaging younger populations in constructive activities and diverting them from crime. Investments in forensic and investigative technology are also on the agenda, aiming to increase efficiency and enable more precise solutions to complex cases. Strengthening community partnerships will remain essential as the Royal St. Christopher and Nevis Police Force seeks to improve cooperative relationships between law enforcement and community members to create a safer environment. The Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, ECCB, has issued a request for proposal aimed at drafting legislation to establish a regional standards-setting body for the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union, ECCU. The initiative is a significant step toward enhancing financial integration and bolstering financial stability across the ECCU, which comprises 8 member jurisdictions. The proposed Eastern Caribbean Financial Standards Board will be a regulatory framework tailored explicitly for non-bank financial institutions. Its goal is to harmonize standards and practices within the region. The objective of this legislative framework encompasses several critical components. It is designed to outline the governance and operational structure of the Eastern Caribbean Financial Standards Board, define its roles and responsibilities, and ensure alignment with international standards. Additionally, the legislation will clarify interactions among the board, national regulators, and various governmental and non-governmental entities. This new regulatory body is expected to address existing regulatory gaps, mitigate opportunities for regulatory arbitrage, and enhance supervision of multi-jurisdictional firms, ultimately cultivating a more robust financial landscape within the ECCU. Interested consultants must submit proposals including a detailed methodology and timeline, relevant experience, and a financial proposal by January 31st, 2025. The selected consultant will conduct thorough research on existing standards, consult stakeholders, and draft a comprehensive legislative framework which must be finalized by November 15th, 2025. All queries related to the request for proposal should be directed to the Office of Chief Director Policy at the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, SEC_CDP at ECCB-centralbank.org. Proposals should be addressed to Chief Director Policy, Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, P.O. Box 89, Bird Rock, St. Kitts, or proposals should be emailed to CEC_CDP at ECCB-centralbank.org with the subject line, Proposal for Legislative Drafting Services for the Establishment of the Eastern Caribbean Financial Standards Board. This initiative reinforces the ECCU's commitment to regulatory excellence. It emphasizes the importance of stakeholder collaboration in crafting effective legislation that responds to the dynamic needs of the region's financial sector. In regional news, panel discusses new real estate bill in St. Lucia, HTS News Force reports.
A panel of industry specialists gathered at the GIS studios for discussions centered on the Real Estate Brokers and Agents Bill 2024. The event, moderated by former senior legal officer at the Ministry of Commerce, Dylan Norbert Inglis, explored key aspects of the proposed legislation. Commerce Minister Emma Hippolyte spoke on the bill's potential to balance industry growth with consumer protection.
One, I do not believe that regulation impedes. I believe that regulation put order and a level of transparency within the industry that is going to cause us to have what I would say is a level playing field, so that persons are aware that there's a Realtors Association, The association should have a board, it should have rules and regulations as to how its members operate. The persons who are using that service should know as well what type of service is provided, what is the qualification for someone to be a real estate agent, the level of payment, what should be refunded, how deposits are dealt with, so that all the stakeholders within that industry, how the lawyers ought to operate, they are part of that grouping, providing and facilitating that service. What are the fees that's supposed to be paid to government? All these things are supposed to be as open as possible.
Key insights provided by President of the Realtors Association, Anselm Mathre, included distinctions between brokers and agents, the proposed composition and powers of the real estate board, and its role in fostering accountability within the industry. Mathre emphasized that St. Lucia won't be starting from scratch, as the legal framework will draw from successful legislation adopted by neighboring islands.
With extending the CARICOM, I think we have extended it and we are honoring the treaties that we signed, but at the same time offering some protection to homegrown businesses. Now, even with that protection, it still doesn't prevent international firms from operating, because they will just open offices and have local representatives.
Yes.
And they have franchises as well. So a local representative, local practicing agent can actually buy into an international franchise, like a Sotheby's, a Chesterton's. I think we had Seville's one time. Remax. We also have prominent business. We have Terra here as well. So I've seen in some of the regulations where there is a move to keep the business for locals, but that doesn't preclude you from getting an international franchise with all of its resources and its training. A key difference, I think that we saw when we look at some of the other jurisdictions, is the age requirement and the years of service should be more than what we're offering. So our barrier to entry is still not the highest in terms of years experience to be a broker.
Legal drafter from the Attorney General's office, Anselm Keynes, highlighted the importance of transparency in the licensing of practitioners.
And under the legislation, Mr. Keynes, how will one get to know who is licensed to practice?
Well, there is a duty on the part of the real estate board to keep and maintain a register of real estate brokers and agents, and associated with that, there is the right of members of the public to be able to go, and once they pay the prescribed fee, they can inspect the register. And that has all the details in terms of registered real estate brokers and agents, in terms of their names, their addresses, the qualifications, the date that they were issued a license, etc. So it is intended that the register will be kept and made available for members of the public at the ministry, and you can go and you have access to all this information.
A lot of people think bill means real estate association, where in this right now it's not the same thing. The bill is one thing and the real estate association is a second, and you don't have to be a member of the association in order for you to register your business, do the course, and to practice as you're supposed to practice. So the apprehension is there, and I'm happy for this forum so that people can understand that steps are being made to regulate the industry, and with the minister's mandate, it is going to happen.
The panel also explored the penalties for those found contravening the legislation. The discussions underscored a collective commitment to shaping a transparent, accountable, and professional real estate industry, setting a strong foundation for the sector's future in St. Lucia.
Company in Trinidad paying greater attention to staff's mental health, adopting policies to improve staff productivity. CNC3 has more.
Despite back-to-back years of billion-dollar profits, Republic Financial Holdings Limited has not adopted an if it ain't broke, you don't fix it approach. Group Vice President Karen Yipchuk says the company had done a work culture diagnostic survey as part of its 5-year strategic plan which focused on human development. She says the staff called for leadership to show more connection, empathy and 360 thinking in the survey.
It is a significant thing for us for work-life balance, and it's something that we have to do because as the next generation of our employees and our customers start to show their different expectations, the organization has to be flexible and evolve with those times.
This, she explains, encouraged the company to embrace remote work more widely in the company.
The working environment, or rather the country, has also gotten much more difficult with traffic. So for the people who have to commute, especially if you're coming either from the east or from south, you're literally spending 2 hours of traffic on a morning and 2 hours of traffic on the evening. That's 4 hours of your day lost. And if we could facilitate some of the staff who can work remotely, that's a big help for them. And we hear from them that they are even more productive when they work from home.
At the 3rd annual Human Resource Legacy Awards in November, the group won the Lisa James Award for Learning and Development and was also nominated for the Corinne Jones Award for Best Place to Work at the ceremony. Ukraine ambassador to Trinidad, Sergei Kositska, says the country is hoping to improve trade ties with Trinidad and Tobago as soon as the conflict with Russia subsides. The ambassador says it believes the Eastern European country can be an aid not just in business and trade, but digitalization training as well. However, it also sees Trinidad and Tobago as a vital connection to the Caribbean region.
We are genuinely interested in developing our cooperation not only with Trinidad and Tobago, but also with other neighbors of your country, while looking at Trinidad and Tobago as a hub for our possible expansion in the region of Caribbean nations.
You can hear more from the Ukraine ambassador in the final big interview for the year this weekend. And now for a look at today's energy and foreign exchange prices. Peter Christopher, CNC3 Business Watch.
We now bring you these international reports.
Let's move on now to Israel, though, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has warned that his country is just getting started against the Houthis in Yemen after a bombardment of airstrikes killed at least 6 people. The United Nations has called for restraint, warning the attacks pose grave risks to its humanitarian operations in the country. The head of the World Health Organization, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, was caught up in the strikes, which happened meters away from a flight he was boarding at the airport in the capital Sana'a. There were also explosions in the Red Sea port of Hodeidah. Shaima Khalil reports from Jerusalem.
Panic and fear in Sana'a airport. People rushing to leave the building after an Israeli airstrike.
The IDF said they hit Houthi military targets there.
The port city of Hodeidah was also hit. Houthi officials said the strikes were barbaric, a crime against the Yemeni people. The Israeli military said it struck targets used by the Houthis to smuggle Iranian weapons into the region. This is the second Israeli airstrike on the Houthis in Yemen in less than a week. The Houthis, an Iran-backed armed group which controls northwestern Yemen, began their attacks shortly after the start of the Gaza war in October last year, initially targeting international shipping, acting, they say, in solidarity with the Palestinians. On Saturday, a missile launched from Yemen injured more than a dozen people in Tel Aviv when it landed in a public park. Israel warned it would respond with force.
We will continue to cut off the terror arm of the Iranian axis of evil until we complete the job.
The Houthis have vowed to keep up their attacks until the end of the war in Gaza. But the war in Gaza continues, as does the wider regional conflict that it sparked.
A short time ago, I spoke to our correspondent in Jerusalem, Emir Nada. He told me more about the escalation between Israel and the Houthis in Yemen.
just over the past week, we've seen this real escalation in the number of missiles fired by the Houthi rebels in Yemen towards Israel, and indeed Israel's response. The strikes that we saw yesterday by the Israeli Air Force on various sites in Yemen, including its main international airport in the capital Sana'a, on ports on the Red Sea, and on energy infrastructure, has led to the death of around 6 people. It is being reported. The Secretary General of the United Nations is calling for restraint. He said that the strikes on public infrastructure are especially alarming because Yemen is obviously a country which has been suffering for many years, and is over 80% of the population there are dependent on aid. But for the Israeli military and political establishment, they're seeing this now as a real central element of a central focus of their calculations, their war campaigns. Caught with the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying that they intend to go after the leaders of the Houthi rebels, and that their campaign is just getting started. Now, the Houthi rebels there in Yemen, some 1,200 miles from where I'm standing, launched their campaign in what they say is out of solidarity with the Palestinian people in Gaza, sending hundreds of missiles and rockets towards Israel over the past year. It's led to also US and UK militaries, air forces being involved in the coalition striking Houthi targets in Yemen. But as we've heard from the Prime Minister here in Israel, it looks like this campaign is just getting started on the Israeli side, and it shows you just how much the war in Gaza is still continuing to reverberate around the region.
And as you mentioned there, the war in Gaza is still continuing, and there had been this a blip of confidence that perhaps we were moving towards a ceasefire. That seems to have died down a bit. How much will this latest kind of element of the Houthi side of the conflict affect any prospects of a ceasefire for Gaza?
It's hard to say exactly how much the Yemen element will impact the ceasefire negotiations. The signals that we've had out of the ceasefire negotiations focus more around the technicalities, around Hamas accusing the Israeli side of setting new conditions, with the Israeli side, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu accusing Hamas, their side, of walking back, withdrawing from negotiations and sort of understandings that had already been reached in negotiations. Meanwhile, we've had the negotiating team telling Israeli press anonymously, some members of that team telling Israeli press that they think Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been undermining the talks by public statements he's been giving in media. So yes, there has been a shift in the tone. The positive signals we heard just over a week ago about the progress of the talks seems to be slowing down. And right now the worry is just whether they'll be able to reach a deal, to strike a deal before the inauguration of President Trump at the end of January.
Dr. Ali Mamouri, a research fellow at Deakin University who previously served as strategic communication advisor to the Iraqi Prime Minister, gave me his reaction to the Israeli strike in Yemen.
It was expected. It's a part of Netanyahu military campaign against Iran, a proxy in the region, after the large defeat against Hamas and Hezbollah that made them incapable of doing or running any kind of operation against Israel. And after fall of Assad, now it's Yemen's turn. Probably after that, Netanyahu will go to Iraqi militias and eventually to Iran. In terms of Yemen, the big difference between this operation and Saudi Arabia-led operation previously is that Israel is not intending to change the government or do any kind of a grand operation. Israeli goal is very clear and limited. First of all, to eliminate the leaders of Houthis, so make the organization not able and capable to continue the operation against Israel, destruct all the missile capabilities and other military capabilities, so Houthis cannot shoot more missiles to Israel. And third of all, push them back from Hadideh to make them unable to make any threat to the ships in the Red Sea. It seems to me that Israel is capable of doing that, and this is the goal for Yemen, not more.
South Korea, where the political crisis has deepened as MPs voted to impeach the country's acting president. There was chaos in Parliament. A majority of lawmakers voted in favour of impeaching Han Duck-soo less than 2 weeks after he was appointed to the country's leadership after the impeachment of the former president, Yoon Suk-yeol, over his failed attempt to impose martial law. Well, Han is accused of aiding and abetting that attempt and also of blocking the appointment of 3 judges that Parliament had chosen to oversee the case against the former president. Well, now this man, Choi Sang-mok, the finance minister, will become South Korea's 3rd president in the space of just a couple of weeks. He said the government has ordered the military to step up vigilance amid fears that North Korea could take advantage of the political turmoil in the south. Well, I've been getting the latest developments from our correspondent Jean McKenzie in the capital, Seoul.
What's happened is this is the opposition party, right, that had voted to impeach Prime Minister Han, who has been standing in as president ever since Yoon Suk-yeol was impeached just less than 2 weeks ago. Now, the opposition party have a huge majority in Parliament, which means they've been able to get this vote through. But what happened when it went through was that these members of Mr. Yoon's party, the ruling party, they were the ones that got to their feet, surrounded the Speaker of the House, started shouting at him. They are angry that he has even allowed this vote to go ahead. Such is now the political animosity between these two parties, total political gridlock in this country. How did we get here? Well, over the last couple of days, this row has erupted between the opposition party and Prime Minister Han. Mr. Han has refused to appoint the judges that Parliament had chosen to oversee Mr. Yoon's impeachment trial. This is the court case that is ultimately going to decide whether Mr. Yoon should be barred from office for good or whether he should be reinstated. And the opposition party have decided that Mr. Han, by blocking these appointments, is protecting the president. And so therefore they say that he's no longer fit to run the country. What this means, as you said, is that now the finance minister takes over. He is now the 3rd in command. But all this does really is just deepen the political vacuum here in South Korea and this uncertainty that has been playing out really since Mr. Yoon unleashed this uncertainty just over 3 weeks ago when he decided to impose martial law.
And this has global consequences because South Korea is a very important global economy. And political turmoil means economic problems, and the currency we know is on the slide.
It does, and South Korea's partners, South Korea's allies, the US, European countries have just been looking on, wondering what on earth is happening. And it's come at a diplomatically an interesting time for South Korea because it is awaiting the return of Donald Trump to the White House, which could be a very unsettling time for South Korea, and yet very little attention is going into preparing for that, about thinking about what should and could happen. And as you say, then there is the economy. The economy is suffering. Just today, the South Korean won, South Korea's currency, reached its lowest level against the dollar since the financial crisis, so 16 years ago. And people here are nervous about that. It's having a real-world impact on their lives. And they are asking, well, where does this all end? Because what if the finance minister comes in and he also decides not to approve these judges? Then the opposition could vote to impeach him as well. And this could continue and continue until essentially South Korea doesn't have a functioning government.
President Frank-Walter Steinmeier dissolved Germany's lower house of parliament to pave the way for snap elections on February 23rd. This is in response to the collapse of Chancellor Olaf Scholz's three-way coalition.
Die jetzige Regierung verfügt ausweislich.
According to the vote on the vote of confidence, the current government no longer has a majority. However, I have not been able to recognize any majorities for a differently composed government in the talks either. I am therefore convinced that new elections are now the right way forward for the good of our country.
Scholz lost a confidence vote in Parliament earlier this month after the departure of Finance Minister Christian Lindner's Free Democrats left his governing coalition without a legislative majority. The vote also kicked off election campaigning in earnest, with Conservative challenger Friedrich Merz asserting that the incumbent government had imposed excessive regulations and stifled economic growth. Steinmeier said that problem-solving must become the core business of politics again after the elections in February. The president also called for the election campaign to be conducted fairly and transparently.
Noch etwas versteht sich von selbst.
One more thing. Of course, hate and violence must have no place in this election campaign, and neither should what they are preparing. Denigration, intimidation, violence, all that is poison for democracy. All of this damages our democracy. We must outlaw violence. That's what I expect from all those who are vying for responsibility.
The Conservatives hold a comfortable lead of more than 10 points over the Social Democrats in most polls. The far-right Alternative for Germany is slightly ahead of the SPD, while the Greens, a coalition partner, are in fourth place.
You were listening to the WINN FM 98.9 newscast. Our top stories were: CARICOM Technical Working Group addresses maritime emissions reduction. Royal St. Christopher and Nevis Police Force reports 57% homicide resolution rate for 2024. ECCB issues request for proposal for regional standards setting body legislation. Panel discusses new real estate bill in St. Lucia. Company in Trinidad paying greater attention to staff's mental health, adopting policies to improve staff productivity. Internationally, United Nations condemns Israeli Houthi escalation. Thank you for listening.